At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
All these patients complaining they can't get their medicines. Insurers and PBMs are often owned by the same giant company, so middlemen, like me, decide what medicines you can get and how much you pay. But don't worry, if your prescription gets denied, we know another one that works for us. I mean, you.
Washington should stop PBMs and insurers from driving up drug costs. Learn more at phrma.org/insurer costs. Paid for by pharma.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion for my Ashes roundup in 2 parts with my regular guest Roland Butcher. In this opening episode, Fail to Prepare, Prepare to Fail, the former England Test player gives his insight into what went wrong for England Down Under and what Australia got right. Roland also highlights some positives for England, including his personal knowledge of young Jacob Bethell, who was brought up in Barbados. In part 2 coming soon, Roland will be answering more listener questions about the Ashes, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who sent one in. Let's find out what Roland thought about the Ashes. Hello, Roland. Welcome back to the show for the first time in 2026.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And as always, it's a great pleasure to be on your show. I hope you also had a great trip down under, and all the best for 2026.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a great trip. I saw 8 days of Test cricket. I saw 2 defeats. I didn't see the third defeat, but the Ashes were nearly gone. Well, they were certainly gone, I think, by the time I actually got home. Now, you said 3-1. And the score was 4-1. And to begin the show, I'm going to play a clip about your prediction, which was back in late October, I think. Let's hear what you had to say in our last conversation.
Well, I think I'll start with the series first. I really believe Australia will win the series. I think they are a much more competent team at home in Australian conditions, which they know very well. Their record is extremely good. The players they have are players who have performed in Australian conditions for a long time. They have to be favourites to win the series, no question about that. I think England, if they get everything right, has the capability of winning a couple of Test matches. But at the end of the day, I think Australia will win the series. I think 3-2, will all games go the full distance? I think, only weather permitting would perhaps stop it from going the full distance. If there is weather involvement, I think Australia could win, 3-1 with a draw. If there's no weather, England could win a couple of Test matches. They could win. I think that they could win perhaps at Sydney and perhaps maybe at Adelaide. But they'll still end up losing the series 3-2. So
I think we can safely say, Roland, you predicted Australia would win the series. Was 4-1 a fair reflection of the result?
I would say, Stephen, I think 4-1 was a flattering result for Australia, really. I think England contributed significantly to that 4-1 defeat. I think when they reflect upon it, they will realise that they had great opportunities throughout the series, not only to win the series, but also to certainly win a couple more Test matches. And I think 4-1, flattered Australia because as well as Australia played, they didn't play as well as a normal Australian team would play. They had good individual performances by a number of players, but as a collective unit, which is usually their strength, they were not at their best. So that gave England a chance. And unfortunately, they missed those chances.
Thanks for that. In this episode, we're going to talk about what went wrong for England, discuss any positives for England, what went right for Australia, and talk about England's future and a lot more. As for the things that went wrong for England, one of them was preparation. And before you talk about it, I want to again play a clip from our previous conversation.
I'm still a bit concerned about the bowlers, in that they just, for me, haven't had enough work for a journey like this. I mean, this is like climbing Mount Everest with, and all you've done is a couple of walks on flat ground. That's not going to work. So they're going to have to perform. The bowlers are going to have to perform like superhumans. If they can do that, then they're in the game. But anything short of that, and it could be quite difficult.
Roland, let's begin then with preparation. You were certainly on the money there.
Stephen, preparation was always a concern for me. As far back as the summer of last year, really, I felt that, I don't think England were preparing properly for the Ashes. There was talk during the summer of obviously looking forward to the Ashes, but talk is one thing, but putting in the preparation to win such a major event, takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. I don't think England paid that attention or to detail in preparation for this monumental task that they were undertaking. Australia at home in an Ashes series, for them it's the biggest thing ever. So they rise to the occasion. If you've got anything slightly out of tune, you will be trampled on. And I thought that England started off preparation pretty poorly, really. And I will go back to, as I said, last summer. The summer finished. And really between the finish of the India series during the summer, there was no red ball cricket for the team to really prepare for such a journey like a 5-test series in Australia. Instead, England sent their test team to New Zealand for a 50-ball white ball tournament. Completely different conditions, early part of the summer in New Zealand. Not the sort of conditions that you're going to get at Perth, Brisbane, Adelaide, Melbourne, or Sydney. And those guys went and played 50 over cricket. Arrived in Australia, played one warm-up game on a low flat pitch, and then walked really into the Lions' Den, the first test in Perth. The fact that Australia were putting you at Perth in the first game should have sent a signal. And you knew that the first test was in Perth months and months ago. So you cannot prepare with white ball or on low wickets to go and play in Perth. Perth is the quickest pitch in Australia. And it always has been. Even though you're in a new stadium, it is still likely to be. And Australia have put you on that in Perth for a reason. They want to start the series well. So England came into that certainly undercooked in terms of their preparation. And that really was a start of bad things to happen throughout the series.
You think instead of sending the test players to New Zealand, they should have sent some other players, England A players, and then sent the test side to Australia to prepare with 2 or 3 matches before the first test?
Oh, most definitely. Because, a shadow squad would have been able to still put up a performance in New Zealand. But the real prize was the Ashes. This is the creme de la creme. So that needs to get the focus. So England should have been in Australia a long time before they did, preparing seriously, getting the right conditions, getting the players match practice, not net practice, match practice, and acclimatizing in Australia conditions, it takes a long time. That's why, I said earlier in my interview with you back in October that by the third test, England will now be starting to play cricket. But it may be too late by that point because of their preparation. Australia will take an early lead. So definitely they should have been in Australia earlier. Had they been in Australia earlier and played, 3 or 4 matches, it didn't have to be against full state sides, but good competitive matches so that players can gauge where they're at in terms of their own performance and acclimatization on the pitches. It'll give you a much better chance going into that first test match. But they went in there really cold and undercooked, and we saw what happened.
Yeah, you did say in that last episode that England needed to get it right in the first 2 tests. If not, it could be a long, long series for them.
Most definitely, because, Australia would be rampant the first couple of tests because they want to get ahead. And if you are not up to scratch in those first 2 test matches, you may well have thrown away the series. And sadly, that's what I thought back then. It happened as it turned out to be. And really, there was no turning back from there. When England started to play their good cricket, it was too late.
And the second test being a pink ball test, a lot was made of the fact that quite a lot of the England players had never played under lights in a pink ball game.
Yeah, again, I think that was an error made again, not certainly getting those guys a pink ball game. They would have been practicing with the pink ball, but listen, practicing in the nets has no bearing whatsoever on what happens in the middle. Practicing in the nets just really is a top up to things that you're working on. The real deal is when you get into the middle, because if you get up first ball, the coach doesn't say carry on batting. You have to make your way back to the pavilion. So net practice is fine, but it did not prepare you for what was going to happen. And we know Australia have got an excellent record with pink ball in Australia. They're literally the masters of it at home. So that makes it even more difficult. So the fact that England did not play any games and then you went into a pink ball test, really you were setting yourself up for failure. Australia were always going to rise to the challenge, and England really cut one of their arms off.
Because in that pink ball test, England's catching was certainly off, and we did drop an awful lot, nearly 20 catches in the series.
Yeah, I mean, that was a part of the England campaign that was pretty disappointing because generally they are quite efficient in the field. And the fact that they dropped so many catches, again, it comes down to, match practice, because with match practice comes a lot of concentration, etc., etc. So, you don't concentrate that well in the nets or in a fielding session. They concentrate to a degree, but it is more like just honing your skills. Now, in a match, it's not honing your skills, it's holding your nerve. And sadly, they went into those matches not, as I said, not prepared properly and couldn't hold their nerves when the pressure times came. And as you know, when things start to go badly, if you're not careful, they can even get worse. And that's the case with England. The catching didn't improve, while the cricket did improve later on. But I think generally I was pretty disappointed with the fielding effort because I know you've got players in that team who are much better fielders than what we saw.
Should England have had a fielding coach? We had no designated fielding coach on the tour.
Well, again, the fielding coach is one thing, but he may just have been a number. I mean, what would he have made a huge difference? I'm sure the staff they had know about fielding. Let's remember that when you get on tour, it is no longer about coaching players, coaching technique. It's about fine-tuning what you have to get the best out of what you've got. So the staff they had could have done that job. But what really hampered them is the fact that they have had no material match practice. That's the problem. You can have 1,000 balls hit in practice, but when you come under scrutiny in a game, that's where it matters. So I think the fielding coach would have been a tick box for a lot of people because they say, It gives them an opportunity, fans an opportunity to say, oh, well, this was a problem because they didn't have a fielding coach. But as I said, a fielding coach, all he does, as well as the batting coach, really, during the series, you don't change anything during a series. You're just really there to help the player to be the best that they can be.
And once the series started, especially those first two test matches, what, in your opinion, went wrong?
Well, apart from what I've said in the past and earlier, right, you've gone into those first two test matches in Perth. I think for a start, the team selection needed to come under scrutiny. I would not, and I voiced it on many occasions before. I think if you dig into your archives, you'll probably find that I always said I didn't believe that Mark Wood should play in the first test. I think he was asking too much. A man who's had the injury record that he's had, he hasn't played cricket for a year. You're playing in conditions that are extremely hot, very hard on the foot. You've arrived in the country late, and you're going to throw your premium fast bowler into those conditions. You're asking for a disaster, and that's exactly what happened, because suddenly your most potent in terms of pace, who could have unsettled the Australians, were no longer available to you after the first test. So that was a monumental mistake in the selection of that team for the first test. I think also that first test they won the toss on batting. I certainly would not have batted that first test of the series. I would want to see what Australia have got. I would want to give my bowlers an opportunity to utilise the freshness of the pitch. Instead, they opted to bat and really played into Australia's hands. From there onwards, really, Australia never took their foot off the pedal. They just really put their foot down, and as you know, they're pretty ruthless when they get you down. And they got England down early, and from there, really, there was no coming back. England just did not have it in them at that point in time, to push the feet back off themselves. Australia were always in the ascendancy.
Going back to Mark Wood, you did say in the previous episode, I wrote this down, I don't think Mark Wood can be match fit. That's what you said.
Well, he wasn't. How can you be? Match fit means playing matches. It doesn't mean bowling in the nets. And unfortunately, they risked the series, really. They risked the series. They risked Mark Wood's career, right, on that decision. And I thought it was a pretty poor decision to make. I don't think you had to be a top-flight cricketer to realise that Test cricket is extremely hard. It's extremely difficult. That's what it's called, Test cricket. It's the pinnacle of the game against a formidable opponent in their conditions. You cannot leave any stone unturned. So to put Mark Wood in that situation, really, you were risking his career as well as the series. And we saw what happened with the series, and we have to wait and see what's happened to Mark Wood's career as a result of that.
Yeah, Mark Wood only bowled 11 overs in that test match, and most of his spells were 2 and 3 overs. And as a result of that, in that first test match, England played five quick bowlers effectively.
Yeah, again, listen, if 4 quick bowlers cannot bowl the opposition out, 5's not going to do it. It's a mistake that a lot of teams make, even when they're batting. They'll play 8 batsmen instead of another bowler, really believing that the extra batsman will make a difference. Now, if 7 batters cannot get the job done, 8 certainly won't. So, you play this lower number of bowlers or batters, put them under pressure, because what I'm saying to you by playing those bowlers, if I'm playing 4 bowlers, I'm really saying, guys, you 4 have got to get this job done. So find a way to get it done. I'm not going to give you the luxury of saying I've got a 5th bowler who's going to chip in. No, I'm putting the pressure on you as my frontline bowlers to get the job done. I thought England relieved that pressure by bringing in another bowler, which was always going to be someone who didn't bowl a great deal. And we saw the results of that. So you can see the catalogue of errors that was being made right from the off as I said, even before they landed in Australia. And you're seeing errors being made in selection, in practice. If you give Mark Wood 2 overs at a time, how is he going to get into a rhythm? You can't get into a rhythm bowling 2 overs. But in saying that, I always believe that he should not have played. I think Mark Wood should have been coming into the test series about the 3rd test. That would have meant he would have had an extended period in Australia acclimatizing. I would have sent him off also during that period of the first 2 test matches. I would have sent him off to play some matches somewhere so that he gets match fit and some overs under his belt and release him in the 3rd test. But your number one weapon was really dismantled in Perth. Give yourself no chance, really.
And was our bowling, particularly early in the series, too short and too wide?
Again, that, call it, people say that was a strategy. Was it a strategy? I am not sure that always that they were trying to bowl short. I just think because the lack of bowling that those guys have made in red ball cricket, it just meant that they kept pulling the length down. If you've been playing regularly, you get into a rhythm of doing things. Now, if you look at the likes of Boland, Nesta, obviously Hazelwood didn't play, but Hazelwood, right? When you see those guys come into a game and bowl, what you see is what they have been doing all before. They just come and hit an area, a good area, and bowl because they have bowled a lot before that. They don't come in rusty. So England bowlers, all of them, really came in rusty. And once you're rusty, you're not going to hit the perfect length. And they were on the short side. Australia are good back foot players. And really that, I would say it was a strategy. It may have been a strategy, but I believe that it was mainly due to the lack of bowling that unit had under its belt.
Turning to the batting, did England, particularly in the first 2 tests, they seem to be trying to drive on the up all the time and getting caught?
Yeah, listen, they probably thought, we can go into Australia and bully Australia like we bullied the other teams with this all-out aggressive approach. But, you're against a very good outfit who, they're good planners. They've got world-class players, batters and bowlers. They're good strategists. They understand their conditions. So, while the approach, I think England had to be, and I've said it before, I think England had to be attacking against Australia. Being defensive against Australia really was setting yourself up for failure. So they had to be attacking. Not reckless, but I think they had to be looking to score at every opportunity. But maybe they thought that they could just be fancy-free and footloose, but not against Australia, who, as I said, were not at their best. They were minus Hazelwood, but the guys who came in, did a good job for them. But, as I said, England did lots of things wrong. That was the problem. Australia didn't have to do a lot right, If England had got certain things right, they could easily have had a much different result in this series. I think when they look back at all those missed opportunities, they would realize, boy, they threw away a chance of an Ashes victory. But Australia were not at their best. Because
in that first test, we were in a strong position at one stage, 100 effectively for 1 wicket on day 2.
Yeah, again, I was wondering since last year what would happen to this England side when they're put under pressure. Because Australia are going to put you under pressure. We know that. That was my concern. And that concern came to me as a result of that last test match against India at the Oval. The fourth day, the last 45 minutes or so, the strategy on the last 45 minutes to an hour really baffled me because England had batted magnificently to chase that total down. And they were in in poor condition to win that. But I think in those last hours, so England hit 1-4. So there's a total mind shift in terms of the aggressive player, as if to say, well, we'll stay out tonight and come back tomorrow. Get the job done. So from then, I was a little bit concerned that, if pressure hits them, what could happen? And we saw what happened the next day at the Oval, where we lost those last 6 wickets for next to nothing. Ended up losing by 6, but you still lost a game that you should have won. And then we saw that in Australia, really, that when they were put under pressure, they just really could not handle the pressure. And you don't want to show that kind of weakness against Australia, because they are the masters at kicking that door down. And unfortunately, England left the door open.
Yeah, the likes of Duckett and Crawley, their highest partnership during the series was only 51. Duckett just scoring just over 200 runs. Brooke, top scorer of 84.
Listen, important against Australia is that you need to get a start. You cannot let them pick up early and cheap wickets. At the same time, you still got to look to score, because you cannot allow them to build pressure, because they are the best team in the world. If you allow them to build pressure, that's where they're comfortable. You got to keep them on the back foot. I think another reason England really failed in this Ashes series is because when put under pressure, I don't think they really believed deep down in their method. And I'll tell you why I don't think so. I always believed that the first 2 tests, they would get into trouble. They would lose those 2 test matches. But I said I believed as the series went on, they would come more into it. But what really happened after test 2, England made the classic mistake of listening to pundits, supporters, ex-players, in changing their method. You cannot change your method completely in the middle of a series. You have to believe in what you're doing. Listen, this is the way we are playing. We believe that this is the way to play. And if you truly believe, you've got to see it through to the end. So you live or you die by that method. You make minor adjustments, but you don't abandon the philosophy. So the third test, we saw a complete opposite of what we've seen in England for the last couple of years. They went from being too free to now being too careful. No, and that's just as bad as being too free, because you're not accustomed to that. And by doing that, at that point, I speak to my cousin Ralph in Barbados on a regular basis, and I said, Ralph, series is gone. England's approach has changed. They've listened to the noise from the outside. They have changed their strategy to doing something completely foreign to them. And we saw what happened in that third test. They were like Trojan. There was no bite. For me, I think England, that third test, England should have gone into that test match. Listen, guys, we're still going to be attacking, because that's where we could get our success. But we're going to have to make minor adjustments. Maybe just make our decision-making a little bit better. But don't abandon the philosophy halfway during the series to adopt a new philosophy, because you're going to be dead and buried. And that's exactly what happened. By the third test, once they made that choice, series over.
And did we become too defensive in selection, playing, as you've said, a number 8 batsman?
Yeah, I mean, that's really is a losing selection. I'm not disrespecting the players involved, but I think if you're balancing the side, you're looking to shore up the batting, and you're not putting enough responsibility on your major batters. You're really saying to them, hypothetically, okay, we've got another one. No, You have to put pressure on those players. You have to make them accountable. If I have 5 batters, guys, you 5 have got to do the job. 8, 9, 10, 11, what they do is a bonus. Right. You are our major batsman. You have to do the job. I'm not going to give you the benefit of 2 other players behind you to say we've got a long batting lineup. No. And I think that's what England did. Again, another mistake because, Jacks didn't do too badly, but he was never going to affect the game. He was never going to bowl enough overs. And all he would be doing as a batsman is trying to retrieve a situation that is gone. Right? You cannot win a series against a top-class team if that is the strategy of retrieving something that is lost. No, you go in there. If you had picked Bashir, no, the pressure is on Bashir. He's accountable. You are a bowler. You have to do the job with the bowlers. So Jacks was really put in an impossible position that, he did the best that he could. I would not attach any blame to him at all. I just think that it just was a catalogue of mistakes that England made all along the way. I don't know if they were overawed by the occasion or of the Ashes. I really don't know, but I'm concerned at the number of mistakes they made. They made too many mistakes.
Because going back to Shoaib Bashir, he had been the spinner of choice, which they kept saying for 12, 18 months, and then he didn't play any test match.
Well, yeah, listen, traditionally, as good as players the Australians are, I still feel they are vulnerable against off spin. I've always felt that about their cricket, not just this year, but almost throughout my life. I've tried to, listen, I have been a fan of Australian cricket since the 60s. Australia was the very first test side I ever saw play cricket. I think it was around 1966 in Barbados, West Indies against Australia, where my cousin took me to see, Monica took me to see this game. And I saw Bill Lawry and Bobby Simpson put on 300 plus for the first wicket. And for me, I was then an Australian from then onwards in terms of how they play the game. So I understand, what Australian cricket is all about deeply. And, I'm really disappointed because I think England, if you take the individual players, they could have done something about it. The other interesting thing, Stephen, is that you look at that last test match and everybody will applaud Jacob Bethell for a magnificent innings, which it was. But in reality, Jacob Bethell was the only batter. Jacob Bethell was the only batter in Australia who was able to go off and play in other matches. So he got the necessary match practice in order to be able to produce an innings like that. The others were just nets or test match. So you can see why the batting was really under pressure because they had nothing behind them. And yes, Bashir, I think really, he certainly should have played a game for sure. Probably from around the 3rd test match. But yeah, I think it was a misguided thing to lengthen the batting against a team like Australia.
A lot was made about England being ill-disciplined off the field. Do you think that had any bearing on the result?
Well, listen, that, in hindsight, people always find reasons why, people lose matches, etc. So they're going to use, if somebody walked and spit on the sidewalk, that's going to be a reason that they're going to use that they lost the series, that they're ill-disciplined, they shouldn't be out at that time having a walk. Someone said that, they lost the series because I think it was at Cass or someone was having breakfast in a cafe and, put his hand in his pocket and a large amount of money fell out on the ground and I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? You don't lose matches or series because of those sort of things. You lose series because either you are not prepared properly, the opposition are better than you, or they take the opportunities and you didn't take the opportunities, or overall your cricket was not up to the standard that those are the real reasons why you lose games. So they will find all kind of reasons off the field to then bring to say, well, these were the reasons for the on-field failure. It's smoke and screens. That's all it is. I wouldn't say that those were the reasons. I am sticking more to the cricket strategic and mental reasons and the guts for the fight. Because that's what it was going to be. Those are the main reasons for me that England failed, not because of whether they're going to a nightclub or have 2 drinks or whatever. That's all peripheral. I'm not saying that that those are things that should happen on a regular basis, but if a guy goes to have a drink, once he's not doing it in excess, what is wrong with that? I mean, you cannot be held up in a hotel for 2 months and don't take a walk out on the streets and stop at a bar and have a glass of wine. If you have 6 glasses of wine, that's something else because you're a professional athlete. But come on, these are big men. You must give them the opportunity to be able to, also live a life once they come back and do the job the following day. But once they don't do the job, then people will use these things against them, and that's what's been done now.
We were 2-0 down when we went to Noosa, but did it send out the wrong message?
Well, it certainly was a mistake because I think when you are 2-0 down, as much as you want the players to be relaxed and think positively about going forward, I think a total relaxation is not what is called for because that can work in the opposite direction. You can then become too relaxed. And, professional international sport, it is not about being relaxed, right? It's being in a position that you are relaxed under pressure, not being totally relaxed. And I think England released in those 4 days too much of the pressure. They allowed the players to become, I think, too comfortable in that relaxation mode. And you can't switch on and off at this level that quickly. You can't be, I'm chilled and relaxed today, and then tomorrow I'm 100%. No. What I felt should have happened is that there should have been given a day or so to, be amongst themselves, away from the coaching squad and the management and everything, just relax. But from day 2, they want you guys back here as a unit, preparing for war. That's what it is, preparing for war. I'm not giving you 4 days of relaxation. So that was another mistake. The list is getting pretty long, but that's another one.
Because there was quite a big gap between I know for myself, between the Brisbane test and the Adelaide test. They could have played a match in between there.
Of course. I mean, it would have made sense to have played a match. And don't tell me that a place like Australia, the size of Australia, that you cannot get a game organized at short notice. I'm not talking about a game between yourselves, because a game between yourselves is not going to provide the sort of pressure and adrenaline as it is against another team. Because if you play against another team, it's because individually you don't want to feel. So your adrenaline rush is more than if you play against your mates. If I'm playing against my mates and Joe Farcher get me out, well, okay, Joe Farcher got me out, no big deal. But if I'm playing against someone who's supposed to be a lesser player than myself, that's going to hurt. So, yes, they could have played those games, and they didn't.
You said previously that we were going to find out whether England had the stomach for the fight. Do you think Australia were mentally tougher than England?
I wouldn't say Australia were mentally tougher. I would say England were weaker than normal. I know Australia are tough all the time, mentally tough all the time. So I was not going to expect anything else from them, apart from, they're fighters. When they're in trouble, they'll find somebody to dig them out of trouble, as Kerry and others did throughout the series. That's the nature of their culture when it comes to sports. So, that comes easy to them. My question mark was always going to be that, when England are under pressure, who is that person that's going to be the stand-up person? Who's going to come in and rescue the situation? That was always going to be my concern. I don't think we handled the pressure well. I think we wilted under the pressure. Australia won the big moments. I think Australia also either got lucky or they made a master stroke when the opportunity presented itself for Travis Head to open the batting because of Courage's injury. Either that was a master stroke or a fluke, but that certainly had a huge impact on the series because we saw what Head did the rest of the series really with his batting at the top of the order. He then gave him the platform to be dominant in the series. So you can say good planning by then or luck, one of the two, but either way that worked out well for them. England didn't make any bold calls like that. I think, we tried to stick to the tried and trusted. Didn't really think outside the box. And, it was a sad series for, not just for the fans, but I don't think the players, when they look back at their career, they will think, well, I didn't enjoy that. And that should not be the case. If you're playing international cricket, you're playing the biggest series ever that you may play in, an Ashes series. I would have given my right arm to play in an Ashes series. I would have tried dying to be part of that. And I'm not sure. And I would like to know how many players that, when they go away would think, what? Did I do myself justice? Not just in terms of the results, but in acknowledging the importance of such a series. That's a question they have to ask themselves. But it came down to the fight, which you're asking me about. I don't think we showed the sort of fight that was required to win a big series like that.
Travis Head, 629 runs, 3 centuries, and Mitchell Starc, 31 wickets, and Alex Carey's runs, and plus Scott Boland and Michael Neser. They were the 5 players that really made the difference.
Yeah, listen, somebody always steps up. When you're under pressure, either with bat or ball, somebody gets the bit between the teeth and rescues the situation. And all those players that you mentioned did just that. But that doesn't happen by luck. That is practiced. That is something that is ingrained in the system. It's ingrained in the players. The responsibility that each individual is given within the team, not just in the test team, but right throughout, cricket and sports in the country. That is part of the DNA. So, it's a cultural thing. When you are up against something that is very much part of your culture, you cannot make mistakes because it comes easy to those people because it's their culture. It's foreign to you, but it's so England have to work hard so that sort of accountability in the future becomes part of the culture, so that every player that puts on an England shirt recognizes that this culture here is what it's about. To make this team a good one, you've got to have the stomach for the fight. If you don't have the stomach for the fight, you're not going to be in there. And If you just look at, boxing, the guys who have the stomach for the fight, are usually the best boxers. Not the hardest hitters. The guys who are going to take the punches, but he's not going to roll over. He's still going to hang in there. So, when you play Australia, you've got to do just that. You've got to take some knocks. You've got to play and miss. You've got to take the sledging. You've got to do all of those things, but ultimately you've got to hang in there. You've got to find a way to hang in there, and fight, because they're going to do it. That's what they're going to do. I mean, we saw it. We saw it right through. You mentioned, and the players that you mentioned, you look at those players' mentality. The Kearys, etc., etc. Those guys are fighters. They love being in the trenches. It's nothing foreign. Being in the trenches is foreign to us. We are, at the moment, good when we're on the front foot and everything's going well. That's great. But when you hit the first roadblock, what do you do then? And it's really sad to be reflecting on something that could have been so good, Stephen. I really felt that. Individual players, we had to do the job, but just couldn't get it done. But getting back to Mr. Stark's performance as well, that wasn't luck. Apparently it was said, but Mitchell Stark took 6 weeks out from having a glass of wine, just totally focused on training for the series. So he clearly had in mind and recognized what needed to happen. He probably also had an inclination that Josh Hazel wouldn't be fit either. And maybe more responsibility would be on his shoulders. Obviously, he took that responsibility off the field to get himself in the right sort of shape and form to do that task. And he did it magnificently. Every time they called upon him, come in bowl fast, he did. To get a wicket, he did. And don't forget his contributions with the bat. So he had a major influence on the series. We didn't have those type of performances in the England side. They were too sporadic. And even in terms of the captain, who is an inspirational player, at times really his performances, he got 5 wickets in the first Test match, but at times his performances were sporadic, and I think that was really because of all the other things that was going on. Not necessarily a reflection on him as a player, because we know he can play, but he wasn't his normal self in the middle.
Stark and Scott Boland, they managed to play all 5 Test matches. Stark 31 wickets, Boland 20. Pat Cummins comes in for 1 Test, gets 6 wickets, and also we had the Alex Carey standing up to Neser and Boland. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, Carey was sensational behind the stumps, wasn't he? I mean, Neser is not slow, but Carey gave him that extra protection of knowing that the batter cannot leave their crease, and that really helped Neser as well. And he came in and did the job that he was asked to do. Yeah, everything lined up nicely for Australia. I really felt that England could have given much more of themselves, and could easily, as I said, with the chances. When I say chances, not just the drop catches. I just think the chances that they had in the series to win games and to influence outcomes, had they taken those, we may have been discussing a completely different situation now. But even if England had been able to take those opportunities and win the series, I still would have been discussing the shortcomings that we're doing now, in order to make them an even better team.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
There were some positives for England. You mentioned him earlier, someone you know well. How impressed were you with Jacob Bethell's 154 in the fifth test at Sydney?
Yeah, it was a wonderful innings by a rookie test player, really. Albeit he's had a good start to his test career. Don't forget he got 3 half centuries in New Zealand last year. Should have got 100. Fortunate for him and his father. I told his father the other day, I was really happy that Jacob didn't play those first couple of test matches because he, like the rest of them, was short of match practice. And, I felt that he would have suffered the same way as the others in those early test matches. As I said, as a result of getting in matches with the Lions, etc., etc. He got himself in a bit of form, but getting back to that innings, it was an outstanding innings under pressure against a very good attack. It really showed a lot of character of what this young man has got. Something that I know that he's got. I've always known that he's had this. And I've always felt that Warwickshire and to some degree, England, to some degree, they have misused Jacob Bethell's strengths and ability. I'll tell you now, Jacob Bethell is an opening batsman. So anywhere 1, 2, 3, he can bat. So it did not surprise me that batting at 3, he can be a success because he's an opening batter by nature. That's what he's always done. And I could not understand for the life of me when he's played for Warwickshire where he's batting 6 and 7. I find that quite unbelievable. The guy is an opening batter, right? From the early days. Jacob Bethell was a product of Barbados Centre of Excellence. I was a chairman of the Centre of Excellence as the director, as the board director. My responsibility was the Centre of Excellence. So I have been able to see this kid all the way through his early life up to 15, 16. And all the way through, Bethell has been an opening batter. He has been a heavy scorer as an opening batter because he has the temperament and he has the game awareness to bat in those positions. So that's an option that England have going forward that, if they continue to get problems at the top of the order, move him up because he can do the job. He by nature, that's what he does. So I was very pleased for him. Really pleased that his family was there. I mean, I know his family really well, his father and his mother, and they were extremely pleased. I spoke with his father recently, and he was really happy with the way that he played in that test match. And I'm sure the England players would be as well because, he did really what, apart from Joe Root, he did really what the others weren't able to do, which was to concentrate for a very long period in a cauldron, really, and defy the Australians and not just defy them, but also counter punch as well. So he made good decisions, and that was the key.
Interesting what you've said about where he should bat, because all we ever heard in the media before the test was that, Jacob should be batting at 6 and going down and down to 7. And you're suggesting that he could be a future England opening batsman.
Absolutely. I mean, sadly, all those people who are thinking about 6 or 7 really have little idea about this kid or about his capabilities or what he has done in the past. So if they knew, they wouldn't be saying 6 or 7. I said England could elevate him anywhere 1, 2, 3 he can bat, and we'll do it well.
And this was only his 28th first-class match, his first-class 100, 154 off 265 balls. He had the best technique of all the England players, Joe Root apart.
Yeah, I mean, listen, because he did what Jacob Bethell does. He doesn't do anything different to any other time. That's how he bats. He's, I said he's good. He has a good technique. I think he's gutsy as well. He's, one thing as a kid, he was always the smallest kid in the age group cricket. But one thing he was always good at, he was always good at playing the short ball. Even if he was the smallest kid, he would still hook and pull. So that was a part of his game that always has been there. Against Australia, you got to hook and pull, and you got to play off the back foot quite a lot. So once he was in sort of form, the conditions were tailor-made for him. He is that type of player. Listen, he's got a bright future. I just hope that they look after him in terms of the amount of cricket that he plays. He can adapt to all the other forms of cricket, but I think he has a real future as a red ball cricketer.
And he's got great pedigree. His grandfather played for Barbados back in the 60s.
Yeah, his grandfather, Arthur Bethell, when I was growing up, he was someone I would listen to each weekend playing on the radio. I would listen to Arthur Bethell batting. Yes, he was a good Barbados player. And, his father, Graham, was a top player. I mean, as a youth player in Barbados, I mean, he was one of the best, his father. So he's come from a good cricketing pedigree. Like his grandfather was left-handed as well.
Two other positives for England in the series. Joe Root making 2 Test centuries, one in the pink ball test in Brisbane and then in Sydney. How would you sum up Joe Root's series?
Well, I think Joe Root showed, which we also discussed back in October, that he was capable of scoring hundreds in Australia. He got that monkey off his back. Not only did he get one, but he got another one as well. So the doubters out there who believe that because he never scored 100 in Australia before, didn't really give him a chance. I always believe that, he was good enough to do that, and he did it, and did it twice. He would have liked, I guess, to be more consistent in the other games as well. But, unfortunately for him, he was getting to the crease a little too early in most of the matches, and which made it, tough for him. But he's a world-class player. I mean, you don't score so many runs in international cricket if you're not a top player. And there's some players who just don't have particularly good records against certain teams. But Joe is a top player. He's one of the best.
And Josh Tongue, 18 wickets. He impressed once he was selected in the 3rd test.
Yeah, I think Tongue did really well. He came into a difficult situation, handled it well, showed that, he's someone that, they can stick by. And to be honest, my cousin Ralph, I have to give him, he was telling me all the time from, Tongue needs to play for the beginning. He was adamant that he should really play. He believed, because he's seen him over a long period of time. He's always believed that Tongue had the goods. But I was really pleased for him because he did that. At the same time, I think I would also like to feel that I thought Cass did a pretty good job as well. I mean, he kept running in. He hasn't had many test matches under his belt, but then to become the leading fast bowler in the group, I thought he handled that well and should be given a lot of credit for what he did in terms of just willing to run in pretty tough conditions. I mean, you're talking about 40-degree plus heat. Is not easy for an inexperienced fast bowler. So he and Tongue really must be given a lot of credit for the jobs that they've done.
Yeah, Cass got through all 5 test matches. England's leading wicket taker with 22. Jofra Archer did well in the 3 tests he played. 9 wickets, and he got a maiden test 50.
Yeah, he did. He started well, but again, as you know, I had my concerns about his fitness. I mean, I did I did remark that England's chances of winning the series before the series really was the fast bowlers remaining fit. That was a key component of any victory strategy, if they could remain fit. It was always going to be difficult because all of them, short of work going into the series. Joe Archer as well. Don't forget, Joe hardly played. Since his injury, he's only had a few games. So we mentioned him, Mark Wood. So two of your marquee players, so to speak, are suddenly out of the system. That puts real responsibility on some inexperienced guys, and those guys shoulder that responsibility well. They must, both of them must be very pleased with their performances because they had to step up. Once Archer was out of it, and he did well. It seemed as if the encounter he had with Steve Smith sort of woke up a sleeping giant. And Steve Smith told him, "Well, what did he say? Champ, you only bowl fast when there's nothing in the game." As Australia were about to win that Test match, but it looks as if he took that to heart as a motivation. And then you saw what happened in the next Test match. So, those were good signs, but couldn't maintain the fitness. And that was not surprising because I always felt before this series that there's no way that he would be able to play 5 tests in the series. That was always my belief. I think if England had handled the whole rotation of their fast bowlers who had injury worries before the series, both Archer and Wood, if they had handled that differently, they might have been able to get through the series with both of those guys making significant contributions. As I said, Archer probably would have played the first couple of tests. Wood would not come into the equation until, for me, the 3rd Test match. And rotate them around like that. And then with Tong and Cass, you could have got through this series with still all the bowlers fit. But there it is. But as I said, those two young men, give them some credit.
Before we turn to the future, and I've got quite a few questions here, you said England needed to be 8 out of 10 to stay in the game. What mark would you give England for the series?
I would give England 5.5. I don't think they deserve any more because I think they made too many mistakes. In many ways, it's like rushing an exam. You know it, but by rushing it, you make silly mistakes, which cause you to fail the exam. And I think that's what happened with England. I think they made some really fundamental mistakes all the way through. As I said before, during the series, which in the end defined what happened to them, losing 4-1. So I cannot give them more than 5.5 out of 10. I'd also mark the Australians, and I'm not giving them any more than 7 maximum. I don't think that they were at the level that they normally play at or would want to play at. I think with 6.5 to 7, they were able to win the series literally because I think England were poor. Were poorer. I don't think that England were completely outplayed by them. I think England played some bad cricket. Australia didn't play great cricket all the time, but I'm going to give them 6.5, maximum 7.
So you'd say the overall standard of the whole series was below average?
Exciting. There's no question about that. I think
two-day Test matches.
Yeah. I think the fans once the cricket was on, so a lot of excitement. I'm sure they would have preferred to have seen the games go 5 days and maybe result in the last day. The Australian Cricket Board certainly would have preferred that as well. But, it was a bit frenetic. But, thank God it didn't go 5 days, because I would have been a nervous wreck watching every night the whole series. So I think sometimes I welcome those 2-day test matches. But it was. Let's put it this way: I don't think it will be a memorable series. I would say 2005 in England was a memorable series. That was a real memorable Ashes series. This one, the records will say Australia won 4-1, but I don't think it's something that's going to live in the memories of fans going forward.
And 2-day test matches, that can't be good for test cricket.
No, that can't be good for any cricket. I mean, it can't be good for a cricket board who, when you put on a test match, you've invested heavily in, 5 days of entertainment. There's huge costs involved. There's huge revenues to be made. When you lose 3 of those days, not only have you lost your revenue, but a lot of supporting businesses lose their revenues, because the people who were selling all different things, whether it's memorabilia or drinks or food or whatever, they're losers as well. So everybody loses when a test match goes 2 days, and ultimately, the series lasted 11 days for 5 test series. There's a lot of money lost. Australia will be counting the losses. They certainly would have preferred to have that money to put into their cricket going forward, but it can't be good going forward to have 2-day cricket. That's a bad reflection on when you're trying to save the test cricket, which is under threat from the white ball game. 2-day cricket doesn't really cut it.
It took us 11 days to lose the Ashes. We did get 18 days in the whole series. Yeah. I managed to see 8 of them.
11 to lose it, 5 test series, but 18 overall. It wasn't ideal, but I was also surprised the pitches as well were not. The Melbourne pitch surprised me. I think it surprised everybody. I don't think that really was fit for Test cricket, and I don't think it really gave the batters a lot of chances on that pitch, and as a result, it robbed a lot of spectators from getting another 2-3 days of enthralling cricket by the nature of that pitch.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of my Ashes Roundup with Roland Butcher. You can find this episode and now nearly 400 others on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or on our YouTube channel.